the Finance Committee meeting of June the 16th, 2022. My name is Mark Adler. I'm your cruise director. We have a smaller group today. We are down to 6. This is getting like a murder mystery. So hopefully the new year, starting July 1st, will bring more people. We'll see. We don't have a lot on the agenda, but we have enough to keep us busy and to get us through the program. So first we have the minutes of the 2 annual town meetings, the pre-town meeting and the meeting itself on the 21st. So first let's consider the minutes for May the 19th, 2022.
Move we
please.
approve.
Second.
There is a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion of that riveting set of minutes? No? All in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. The minutes are approved. Thank you. And now the minutes for the May the 21st, 2022 annual town meeting, Donna.
Move we approve.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to approve those minutes. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Minutes are approved. Thank you very much. And a special thanks to Alex for putting them together. They are read, they are kept. And I want to remind everyone who's watching and everyone who's participating that the minutes are very helpful because we don't always remember what we do from meeting to meeting. It's always very nice to pull it out of the minutes and say, oh, this is what it was. So it's the reason we have such a formal record is for our own recollection and for the legal record too. Next, we have a report of the town manager, Mr. Mizikar.
Good evening, everyone. The first item under the town manager's report is for the committee to consider action on 2 reserve fund transfers. A reserve fund is a set-aside amount that comes in the general budget that allows the finance committee to control the dollar amount and consider it for use to offset any unforeseen and unexpected circumstances that occur throughout the course of the year. Unfortunately, as we near the end of the year, we have a couple challenges in 2 departments. One has happened in the past, and it's just the nature of how the fire department is budgeted for and operates. And I'll go into that one first. It's quite sizable, and I do apologize for not giving the finance committee heads up on this at least 2 or 3 months ago, which I should have done. Sometimes we always hope that we'll be able to close the gap, but this one just continued to grow. So with regards to the fire department salaries and wages account, we have estimated that we'll be about $187,220.64 short. As you know, we control at the salary and wage line item and at the expense line items, and we can't cross funds in between categories. I have Deputy Fire Chief Seth Colby here this evening to answer any detailed questions, and there is a summary memorandum that has been provided by Fire Chief James Vona that was included in the drive and printed out for you this evening. Unlike some departments, we of course backfill almost every position and every shift that becomes available. So if someone's out on injury, that creates some of the greatest opportunities to overrun the budget. A lot of other time, if a professional or administrative employee is out sick, we don't backfill the position and they're paid sick time. So not only do we pay sick time or use injury on duty insurance to cover the cost to pay the firefighters out, we also backfill that position to ensure proper staffing to be able to respond to emergencies. And this year we had a couple injuries, and we also, in kind of our debriefing on this, have come to realize that we haven't sufficiently accounted for the increased staffing and the backfilling of just normal vacation time and sick leave as we've increased the size of the department. So that's something that we did correct as we went into the fiscal year 23 budget. We should be in a better position, but I can't guarantee we'll make it out perfectly at the end of next year, but that's always the goal. So again, we're looking for $187,220.64 to cover a shortfall in the salary and wage aspect of the fire department. And we're here to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Good, Dennis?
Are there going to be any COVID relief funds available for the officers that were out due to COVID? Is there any government or any funds we could use from that? Because this was COVID sick time loss. I know they.
So we did receive, so the only programs that were available throughout the course of the fiscal year, and Mary can correct me if I'm wrong, but was an $850 per week incentive to cover whenever an individual was diagnosed with COVID-19 one time. So it's $850 per employee. We did receive funds through the state for that when individuals were out, but that came in as a receipt, and it's not able to backfill the budget. So we have the cash on hand, but we can't supplement the budget line.
Yeah, all funds that come in are general fund receipts. We can't earmark them for these purposes.
Do we know how much for COVID relief for the fire department we've gotten in general receipts? I mean, is it $1,000 or $1,600, or is it like $10,000?
I mean, we got about $200,000 in total for the town. I don't know what the fire department is.
Okay, but there is money from that
Yep.
in reality should be used for this type of position. I know it's budgetarily, we won't do it straight away, but
Yep.
we did receive some money for those people being out sick. Okay.
That's correct.
Correct, yeah.
The second one is, as you were reading, I was thinking, it seems like it's a backfill overtime issue that we've run into. So I know I think we're adding some staff for next year. How close do you think we'll get just for normal vacations? And also, will we be able to cover normal vacations and some of this sick time?
So, do you want to?
Either way, I can.
Okay.
So right now we have 10-person shifts,
Yep.
and that's including the officers and the firefighters. We're able to work down one firefighter on each shift. So basically, the first vacation, the first sick, is a no-fill. We're able to cover that. The goal, and right now we're not adding any positions at this time for next year.
Oh,
The goal is we are applying for a grant, and we're hopeful.
Yep.
But at this time, we don't have any plans to add any more firefighters. The ultimate goal would be, if we are able to add 4 down the road, is then we would have 11-person shifts and we'd work to 10. So it's not a matter of we'd be able to cut deeper into the staffing to not fill the shifts. What we're trying to accomplish is get three people on each truck. Right now, we have engine 3 out of Centec that only runs with 2 firefighters on it. So the goal would be to put an additional firefighter there, which would get us 3 firefighters at each station that are able to respond. And that gets us closer to the national standard, which is 4. So, but 2 is definitely
and then
way.
what do we typically run over the budget due to vacations and all that? I mean, it sounds like we're always tight.
Yep.
Is it something that hiring an extra person would actually be a cost benefit, where we'd actually benefit from that extra person by cutting down on all the overtime we're paying?
I think the only time I think we're rather close because we have increased it for fiscal year 23 to cover standard vacations and
yeah.
sick.
That's what I was
We
thinking.
really run into a challenge when we have someone that's out, like non-injury on duty. Like this year, we had a firefighter in the spring break his ankle on personal time. So that individual goes out on sick leave, and we're paying them out of the budget for that, and we're paying to backfill that shift. So that's where we really run into challenge. And of course, this year we had 5 extended injuries. So
There's probably no desk duty for a firefighter that you can just sit him at a desk.
No, and 2 of the last 2 that we had, that neither one of them happened on duty. They were both injuries that happened, so they were out sick, not IOD.
Yep.
But one was a captain and one was a lieutenant, and they were both out for approximately 3 months. So those are positions that have to be filled. So we actually made provisional appointment. We actually had a lieutenant that moved up to act as a captain for that period of time, and we had a firefighter that was on the promotional list that had taken the exam. He was next in line to be promoted, that he moved in to fill the lieutenant's position. But unfortunately, those are positions that have to be filled, and that's what really ran the number up the last few months was those two individuals, and they both just came back to work within less than 2 weeks. They're both back now.
Thank you. Donna?
How many of your COVID cases were work-related?
Impossible to tell. We don't have hard facts that any of them were work-related. We had strict protocols in place, so they had to wear, there was mask wearing and gloves and all the PPE, not only on calls. We actually required that PPE on all calls, not just medical calls, so anytime they were interacting with the public, they would wear masks. And they also were required to wear masks in the station when they were in close proximity. And where they work 24-hour shifts and basically live together, that's challenging, but we tried to have them spread out and not all eat dinner at the same table and spread out and eat at different tables. But whenever they were in the fire trucks together where they were in close proximity, or if they were having any kind of a meeting or interacting with the public, they were always masked up. So we don't have any proof that any transmissions actually happened while on incidents or in the station. But there's no proof that they didn't either.
Is everyone vaccinated?
We're, I think, over 95% vaccinated
That's
in the
good.
fire department.
Good.
And the vast majority of them all have at least 1 to 2 boosters as well.
Yeah. And as far as the injured on duty, you're lucky that's all you had for injuries because it is a dangerous job. But do you have to go through safety reviews? Because I know you're not connected to OSHA, but do you have to go through safety reviews for?
We are actually
Injured people?
held to the same standards. And yes, if there was an injury due to equipment or procedure or something, then we absolutely would be held to task on that. These were, I guess without getting into specific, one of them was, they were just routine things that,
Fluke.
it was a fluke. It was a
Yeah.
fluke, basically.
Yeah. And that happens.
Yeah, none of them were, they weren't due to, they weren't on the fire ground due to poor policies or practice or lack of training, or it was,
Right.
essentially, it was just an accident
It
by
happens.
definition of an accident.
Right. And lucky it all happened, all these injuries all in one cluster. But are all the radios now set up as far as the upgrades?
Yes or no? The vast majority of them have all been distributed. As the part of the upgrade, we built out 2 sites, 2 simulcast sites here in town, one up on top of Masonic and one behind Station 3 on Centec. Both of those sites are fully up and operational. Police department, fire department, all the public works, Celco, they've all been issued the radios, both vehicle radios and portable radios. So for the most part, it's there. There's still bits and pieces with it. There's some temporary equipment that's operating because of supply chain issues. So we have some loaner hardware that's been installed by Motorola and other vendors, and when our equipment comes in, they'll have to swap that out. There's some of the redundancy that's still getting finished up because they're connected by fiber optic. The sites are also connected by dish, a microwave dish connection, so that if the fiber optic goes down, it still has connectivity so that the sites can all talk to each other. So there's some bits and pieces to finish up and fine tuning, but it's very close and it is operational.
And so when it's all done, what will be will there be another problem, or will we have met all of the discrepancies that we had?
Specific to radios or in general?
No, radios. We'll start with radios.
Because there's always going to be another problem.
Right.
That should put us in very good shape radio-wise, for quite a number of years. There's ongoing maintenance, and we have, part of this is that there's subscription fees and there's maintenance contracts that we do with Motorola. So they'll come in as needed annually or more often and do upgrades for software and maintain that. The old system we had before, most components were over 20 years old. It was something that had been put together kind of piecemeal. They'd put a voter here, put a repeater here. It was a mixed match of hardware and equipment, and it was, honestly, it was to the point where you couldn't get the parts for them anymore. So we'll be in much better shape.
Good.
Quick question, if I may. You talked about the maintenance and contract, and so does that mean we wouldn't be having to pay overtime to firefighters to do any of that? That's all gonna be taken care of, it's gonna be won't be an extra cost to the fire department itself, it's just built into the maintenance contract.
Correct. So we have a couple of years after the project is complete.
Yep.
There was part of it that it's basically under warranty,
Yep.
for lack of a better way to put it. So we won't actually see any maintenance costs for another couple of years.
Yep.
That's something that probably next year we would be putting in as a projection, so that it's not a surprise the next year.
But that'd be a fixed maintenance cost, it wouldn't be an overtime cost or anything? You wouldn't have,
Correct.
like you have the mechanic doing a lot of setup.
So a lot of that cost, and I know it looks like a big number and a lot of hours, a lot of that is that our mechanic, Joe Milos, actually installed all the mobile radios into all the town vehicles.
Yeah.
Originally, they wanted to do that, and Joe did it for, I don't know what the number is off the top of my head, but I'm gonna say he did it for probably a third of the cost or even less. He was able to do most of them. The swap out took less than an hour per vehicle to swap the radio out, and Motorola would have paid, I mean, you've all taken your car to the garage, you know what the shop rate is for that, so their fee was much higher. So despite the fact that that was a big overtime cost, it actually saved what
town.
we paid to Motorola was actually less than it would have been had we not had Joe install it and we had Motorola put them all in themselves.
Donna?
Do you have anybody in your department that's gonna be able to step into Joe's shoes when he decides to retire? I know I don't know, he's young still, but.
The town manager, the fire chief, and myself, we've actually had conversations regarding this over the last year or even more. The short answer is no. Joe is definitely unique with his being a diesel mechanic, having all his emergency vehicle certification certificates, and being able to do all the radio equipment, basically being a radio tech. More likely than not, and I don't know how detailed you want to get, but more likely than not, when the time comes that Joe retires, that the radio piece will be handled by one person, and the mechanic aspect will be handled with a different avenue. But that is something that, as we move through things, that we are considering long-term, because you never want to have all your eggs in one basket. And even if before he retires, if something was to happen to him, he gets hurt or is out of work, you know, we obviously need to have people to be able to step into that role.
I mean, could the Department of Public Works, they have mechanics and all that, I mean, they have a whole garage, is that something that would be possible to?
Yeah, we're that's part of the plan this year, is to figure the scope of work out for the fleet maintenance division and all the emergency vehicle technician certifications and physical space requirements and things like that we would need to service the fire
Yeah, 'cause
department.
it seems like Joe's a single point of failure,
Yep,
which in every private company I've been in, you know, we're mandated to get rid of single points of failure.
yep.
Not get rid of the person, but, you know,
No, absolutely, and on the maintenance side, currently correct me if I'm wrong, currently, fleet maintenance does not have certified EBTs.
Yeah.
But that is something in the future to move to. They certainly have the ability to fix the trucks. Worst case scenario is they go back to the dealer. Most of our fleet, we have a couple of emergency one vehicles, but most of them are all KME fire apparatus. The local dealer for them is right in Hopkinton, and So worst-case scenario is we can always bring it there,
Yep.
and they would be able to do the repairs. On the radio side, at the immediate point, Joe's counterpart, the radio tech that works in the city of Worcester, he's great. He's been very helpful and instrumental in this project. And I've got his cell phone and my cell phone, and if for some reason Joe is unavailable or not able to come in, he's been in town. I couldn't tell you how many times he's been in during this project. I think he watched more of it than I did happen, you know, and he was there every day inspecting their work, and because they have a vested interest in it as well, because the city of Worcester has three sites, we have two, and they're all linked. When I was talking earlier about linked by fiber optic and linked by the microwave dishes, those 5 sites are all linked together. So their sites that they have on Green Hill Park, and they have one on Route 20 up by Mack Motors on top of the hill, those sites actually help us. They cover our west side of town, and our sites kind of help them down along the lake and on the east side of the city. So if we have a failure, they have a failure, and vice versa. So we certainly have support, and we have backup. And we're also tied in with the state radio system. So we have state radio techs that will come out. And we're actually hoping that moving forward, we're able to work an arrangement with them to actually pick up some of the maintenance and long-term costs with that, so.
Mr. Chairman, can I just add to that? I just want to make sure everybody understands. Joe evolved, and he's just so talented. He didn't just say, okay, I'm going to do all these things. He just happens to be the guy that's the master of everything, not even a jack of all trades. He's a master of everything. And so as these items came up, he just happened to be the natural talent to do it. Am I right?
Very well said. He's
Yeah.
a lot of natural talent.
Yeah,
You
so-
can, if he sees something once, if somebody shows him, he's there, and that's his success, is if there's something he doesn't know, he's gonna watch that technician or whoever do it, and then he knows why. He's not content just to say, can you take care of this, it's not working. He watches them so that the next time it breaks, he can just fix it.
Anyone else on this?
Mark.
Vikram, go ahead.
So, more of a budget question for Kevin. So Kevin, given that we have 2 reserve transfer requests today and we're a little bit short, and it is the end of the year, but do you think it on our side or on the town management side, do we have to revisit the amount that we appropriate in the reserve fund for future budgets as a result of this? Is that your plan going forward?
Yeah, I do think it's something that we should discuss for fiscal year '24. It's an awful small percentage of the,
Right.
even just the municipal side, which is, $60 million or so. So yes, I do think we need to look at it. I was hesitant to do it, when we adjusted the budgets last year and this year and the first 2 years of the override, we'll be able to cover everything. But yes, I mean, as a person, kind of as a best business practice, how much we should have in the reserve fund as a proportion of the overall operating budget, we're awful lean. Yeah.
Yeah, that's something, Vikram, that I was concerned about too. In years past, when I was first on the finance committee, we were approving reserve fund transfers that were routine for a routine matter, and Kevin worked it out to fix that in the budgets. That way it didn't have to come to us, so that way we were truly just a reserve fund organization. But the disadvantage of doing that is, although we can disperse our money out to those departments, we can't take money from those departments if they have overflow. That's much more complicated. That requires town meeting to do that kind of gobbledygook, which is, a little nerve-wracking. But when times are tight, if we put too much into the reserve fund, then we're, and I'm sure, Kevin, there's state law about what the size of it, what the maximums are and the process. And, it's not like we could put the entire budget and every week we get to vote on what we want to budget. There has to be some rules and constraints. This is 80% of our reserve fund, however, today. And I was wondering if we had been using our reserve fund throughout this period and we didn't have this money, what would the fire department do?
Do you want to talk about the interdepartmental?
Yeah, under Mass General Laws, a few years ago, the Department of Revenue there's been a new policy where you can, with the Finance Committee and the Selectmen's approval, you can make those interfund transfers. Here in Shrewsbury, we've never gone down that road. We always felt that the Maytown meeting, we were able to cover any, large overages. We could take money from free cash, and we do have those articles there, but at the time, the reserve fund did have enough money to cover the current shortages. So at year end, if there was a critical need or some, God forbid something happens between now and June 30th, so with the Board of Selectmen and with the Finance Committee's approval, we could do interdepartment transfers.
And this is only at year's end, or is this
Year
any
end.
time?
Correct.
The last,
The last,
2 months, I believe.
2 months of the
Yeah,
year,
60
right.
days of the fiscal year.
that's good to know. I hope we never need to, and I'm glad that there is that backstop behind our backstop
Yep.
in this system.
Yep.
Donna?
I'm wondering if you can have, instead of budgeting for, in case there's injuries in the fire department, what about if you had a separate category for in case there's injuries in any department? Whether it be the police department, the highway department, have it so that you have a pocket over here with money just specifically for that, and it's not within each individual department, it's just a rainy day fund for that,
An injuries
or a
department.
Band-Aid fund.
I don't know.
I'm just thinking, that way it's not within a department, it's only used for that, and if you don't use it, it goes back into the general fund.
Well, the way I see it is every expense in the town, and for that matter, every source of income, of revenue, has its question marks and its unknowns. It could be injuries that send our expenses up, but it could also be, building problems, or need for buses, or change in petroleum prices, or whatever it is. That's, again, why we have our responsibility to kind of create that little bit of resident moderated buffer.
Yeah, if you set that money aside just for that, you'd lose that money if there were no injuries.
You can't put it
You
back
can't
into
put
the
it
general
back
fund
in.
at the end of
So
the
I
year?
think
Yeah.
it'd go back into the general fund, but that would be funds that wouldn't be able to be used that year unless.
But I'm saying, we're doing the reserve fund transfer. Instead of having to do that, you have almost like, I don't wanna say your workman's comp, but your injury crisis, management. You look at however many you have in a year on an average, and you just kind of put a certain amount aside, and if not, it goes back to the general fund. Therefore, no one owns it.
Then you're
I think
committing to
what-
that. That's,
Yeah.
I'm not sure what we have now is broken. And it needs to be- I said, I'm not sure what we have now is broken.
Yeah.
I mean, we're still gonna make it through this year.
Yeah.
And we have a backstop, I think,
I'm
Yeah.
making reference to what we went through when you're talking about every week, every month, we had reserve fund transfers.
yeah, that
all
was
the-
for the sick leave bank, I think, or some such thing. Mary, you might remember it was from
Yeah, the sick leave plan too.
Yeah.
We would pay that out in January. We've since changed that, and now that's budgeted in the Personnel Board budget versus the Finance Committee. So we did take
Yeah.
some of those expenses out of the,
and that was certainly a predicted amount, at least a more
Yes.
predictable amount.
Yeah, yeah.
So and that was it. And I think it had been in there because it had probably been shoehorned into the reserve fund one day, many years ago, and it was just, it wasn't a lot of money, if I recall. It was, as things go.
I actually like it coming through the Finance Committee because
Yeah.
it's an opportunity to ask questions and to, not only for us, but for the public to hear why this overrun happened, what could be done in the future, et cetera. I think it keeps it more open to the public. So if we move too much of that out, you won't get that kind of information out to the few people, I'll admit, that watch, but it's still, it is the town, it's the town's money.
Dennis, our ratings are very good.
Must be the days I'm out.
All right. If there's no other questions, is there a motion to consider one way or the other this reserve fund transfer?
Will we approve the transfer?
There's a motion and a second to approve the reserve fund transfer. It's request number 2. It's labeled request number 2 because as you recall, we did one earlier in the year. Is there any further discussion on this motion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. Motion carries, and the reserve fund transfer is approved. Thank you. Let me just write my notes here, and then we'll move on. Thank you, Deputy Chief, for helping out today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't get to do a lot of these, so I want to make sure I do it right. All right, there is a second reserve fund transfer, number 3 for the year. Mr. Mizikar, will you present it, please?
This is a request to use $11,000 of the $14,000 that remains in the reserve fund to transfer to the town's Medicare employer match. This is the town's responsibility to the federal government and our contribution to the Medicare system. The primary reason that we're short, since it's a percentage of salary and wages, actually is derived from grant-funded positions within the school department, and they've funded the vast majority of the cost of the Medicare responsibility, about just roughly 60 of the $70,000 that was required for those grant-funded positions. However, there is a shortfall that we're requesting through the reserve fund to cover what is needed for the rest of that. So happy to answer any questions if you have them.
Any questions from the Finance Committee? I have one. So does the school department normally handle all of its Medicare obligations, or is that the town's budget?
It's in the shared operating expenses part of the town.
In the usual,
Yes.
but since these were grant-provided positions or grant programs, so was that money included in the grant? Is that why the school department is paying for it? That's what I'm wondering. Why is the school department handling that part of it?
There, it was not included in the grant. It's not a grant eligible reimbursement. They used other year-end fund balance or ability to cover the costs, knowing that we could never absorb the full $70,000 on the town side.
Okay, so then where did the number 11,000 come from? How did,
It's just the difference of what they couldn't
yeah,
fund and what was still needed in the Medicare line.
okay.
Right. The
Dennis,
school department itself did set aside or come up with a majority of that money.
Yeah, 60 of the 70,000, or yeah, 59 or whatever the numbers worked out to be. Yep.
any other questions from the committee or any action on this request? Donna?
No? Oh, move we approve.
That's what I'll say. I was being subtle, sorry.
I thought you were asking me if I had a
Donna.
question.
And there's a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of this reserve fund transfer, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries, and reserve fund transfer request 3 is approved. Thank you very much. Let me just write this out. Okay. Next on our agenda are the status of the remaining year's revenues and charges, Mr. Mizikar.
Yeah, thank you. So just a really brief update. We've included through May 31st local receipts in your drive and in front of you this evening. So we're in an overall very strong position. We've collected $12.2 million, budgeted for $10.9 million in expected revenues. The $12.1 million, again, is through 11 of the 12 months of the year, and it is about $900,000 shy of total receipts for fiscal year 21. So if June is like May, then we'll have no problem matching and exceeding fiscal year 21's number, but I think we'll be a little bit closer than I anticipated. You can see some of the biggest differences year over year, and where we still have variances is in motor vehicle excise tax. We're still about $275,000 short of our budget estimate. I have to believe that's due to supply chain issues and the challenges and duration of getting motor vehicles and how that has continued to lag and has been present throughout the entire fiscal year. And then investment income, of course, as two things are happening. Our amount of cash that we have on hand for major capital and projects that help with investment income is declining, and of course the markets are not performing very well. So that is about $160,000 below budget at this point. Everything else is rather strong, again, putting us about $1.3 million over budget thus far, but I'll be very interested to see if we can match the fiscal year 21 totals, which we need about $900,000 to do. With regards to expenditures, overall, no challenges within the operating budget. I think we'll turn back a normal amount, and I'm going to give you a big range between $1 and $2 million again this year, which is rather normal. Still hard to tell at this point in the year specifically. We have about $5 million left in the operating budget overall. We have a lot of payroll intense things that happen in June, like we pay out for some teacher stuff over the summer, healthcare cost increase starting in June for July and things like that. So there's just a lot of extra costs in June. But all in all, we're in a rather solid position, both local receipts revenue, tax revenue, and expenditures. So happy to answer any questions, and we'll provide a more detailed report once we close the books in the fall, but just wanted to provide that good news.
Yeah, go ahead, Vikram.
So, more of a futuristic question, Kevin. I mean, we've gotten good results in several areas, but with the so-called coming recession or whatever is going to happen, inflation, what do you think a backup plan should be, given that receipts may not be so good next year in many of these areas?
Well, assuming that we collect at least another $300,000, we would already be at what we budgeted for fiscal year 23. So I think we're still in a really good spot with local receipts. Since we've been so conservative coming back from COVID, despite the strong recovery, I think we're still in a good spot where we wouldn't have to back anything off. I think Ruth Anderson's done a really good job, the principal assessor, and she hired a company to go out and do some audits of commercial properties and their personal property, and identified about $30 million in additional assessed value that it will bring in about $300,000 in additional revenue. $10 million in total assessed value. So it's a really good buffer for us as we head into the fall. What I may suggest in light of this conversation for fiscal year 23 and some challenges that we may face would be to, if we have additional funds in the fall to adjust because of how the state budget plays out, to put that into the reserve fund. We of course budget for fuel and oil, and we're locked in from January through December, so we may have to look at that in the second half of the year. And then just, I know water, chemicals, it's obviously an enterprise account, but something that we'd have to consider if we have a big challenge. Water, chemicals, for the fiscal year through the consortium that we use, all came in at least 2 times what they were in the prior year. Now we increased all of our budget estimates by at least 30%. So we'll just have to kind of watch expenses and the bottom lines of the budget, but we are experiencing those inflationary challenges that everyone else are. So I think that's what I would do in the fall, and then maybe we just wouldn't be able to increase local receipts again going into fiscal year 25 or 24's budget. Yeah.
Thanks.
If we do go into the recession or whatever we want to call it, how does that affect the property receipts for property tax receipts?
Well, it's not gonna, so property taxes are a January through December and a 1-year lag. So the property taxes and the rate that we're gonna set in the fall will be based on calendar year 21. So calendar year 22, 21 was still very strong. So it's not going to have a near-term impact. It'll be property taxes as far as taxation in Massachusetts is a very lagging indicator. So that is good in some ways for us. Property taxes may be a challenge, 2 budget cycles ahead of now.
I'm just wondering what kind of challenge, I mean, how much
Yep.
with the property value, is it property value falls? I mean, how, because we're not reevaluating property values every year.
Well, I mean, so since we start with the levy, we never have a shortfall.
Right.
It's just the increase in the rate.
Yeah,
The
that's
challenges
what I was
we-
getting at, is
Yep.
that part of the budget won't have a shortfall.
Yep, that's correct.
Other than say new growth,
Yep, new growth could
but
be impacted.
again, the lagginess of it.
Yep.
Anyone else? I have a question on the pilot line. What is the source of, and it's fairly small, but what is the source of our pilot payments? And I thought that sort of thing would be contractual, so it would be more predicted than the numbers would indicate.
The pilot payment comes from the Shrewsbury Housing Authority. Their fiscal year ends on March 31st, and at that point, I usually reach out to them to remind them that the payment is due in June, and it's based on their number of units times tax rate, and they've got a formula that they use every year. We might have bumped it up a little bit more than, what we had in the past, but it's usually, pretty close. But that's the only pilot payment that we have is the Shrewsbury Housing Authority.
Okay, so it's more about either payment is in process or units available aren't being rented or something to that effect.
Number of bedrooms, it's a federal calculation. They ask us what our tax rate is. So I don't know what the federal piece of that is, where they derive that, but we give them the tax rate and then they multiply it by the number of units in their formula, and that's how they calculate
see.
what's due to the town.
I see. And that's the only source of this pilot line on the Schedule A. Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Questions on our local receipts or any other revenue or charges questions? Okay, thank you very much. Let's move on to item 4. We should act to authorize the chair or the vice chair to sign such glorious reserve fund transfers as what we did tonight. This is something we typically do over summer. We don't often meet, and we say, look, let the chair or the vice chair sign it, and then just kind of back act on it. Unless, of course, we end up meeting, in which case it kind of becomes superfluous. But it's a backstop. It's a backstop of our backstop. Donna?
Is there a limit to the amount that gets signed without having the committee form?
We could do that. I think we have done that sometimes. but-
$1,000.
What?
I think it's $1,000 limit. That's all that's left in the fund.
No, but the new
New fund comes.
starts
Okay.
on July
Yeah.
1st.
Well, no, so this wouldn't be for the new fund. It's for the fiscal year 22 closeout.
Okay, so
Yeah.
would we not have a backstop set for the new fiscal year? I mean, granted, we don't do a lot of reserve fund transfers at all, and we do even less of them for the brand new year that just started. I can't imagine a shortfall in the new year that just started.
Well, we used to set a limit of $5,000.
Yeah,
But you only have $3,052 left this year.
So
I
it's
guess
not
that's the
even-
difference.
so 3,051, just to
That's
show that we
it.
can hold it.
For that,
Yeah.
so it doesn't matter. It's irrelevant.
Yeah,
This year it is irrelevant, but yes, normally you do.
well, for
Just
the,
remember that.
for the sake of our memory, right, exactly. Let's remember that that's a good process to do, to set some standard, or not, but to at least deliberate it and consider,
To
well,
agree on an amount.
or not to have an amount, one way or the other. Sure. Does anyone have any sense of this, and would anybody like to make a
Move we
motion?
approve authorization of the chair or vice chair to sign reserve fund transfers pending ratification at a subsequent July or August meeting.
Second.
And I'd like to just clarify for the record, this would strictly be in the 2022 fiscal year.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay. Is there any further discussion on this motion?
Nope.
Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed say nay. Motion carries, and the authorization is approved. Thank you very much. I don't know exactly when we're going to meet again. We have plans, but sometimes those plans get changed because we don't have a lot of business. Typically, by law, we are supposed to reorganize at the first meeting on or after July 1st. But in case we don't, I don't want to have us come together just for the sake of voting for someone and then we all leave. So that's why we have item number 5 here. We would postpone reorganization, which is where we elect our officers, until whatever is going to be our next meeting, and we wouldn't be meeting just for that purpose. Does that all make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Need a motion?
I don't think so, but let's do it because it's fun to have motions. Motions
Okay,
are fun.
move we approve to postpone the reorg until the next scheduled meeting.
Yep.
Second.
That's about it. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed say nay. Motion carries. Thank you very much. Okay, that's pretty easy. Speaking of, we will continue scheduling our meetings on the third Thursday? Third Thursday, also known as the food truck night, which is a much better reason to come here. July 21st will be the next one. One after that will be August 18th. Much more likely to be September 15th because we'll be dealing with, we will have dealt with a whole summer of exciting reserve fund transfers to approve. And what's more, the usual unofficial fall town meeting will be considered as well. So that's the schedule. I hope everyone will be able to join us, including Donna. What's up?
Not me.
You're not going to join us?
No.
Okay.
So I was wondering, have the new people been appointed?
They have not.
They have not.
They have not.
Okay, well, I'd just like to say that this is my last meeting.
Oh, okay.
And
You say that now.
Maybe you'll be one of the new people.
no, I already said no, thank you. So all I'd like to say is that from August to today, June, I realized that I love doing this stuff, but since I've retired, I love my own time. And so it's with mixed feelings that it's my last meeting, but it really is nice to not have a schedule once you stop. And I had been a selectman for 12 years, on the finance committee, I think for 18, but I can't remember. And so now it's 30-plus years, and I think that's good. That's good. If you need me to substitute once in a while, that's okay, but I like my time. Thank you.
Well, Kevin always has jobs he's posting, and I'm pretty sure you're going to be at the top of the list. So you get to choose which ones you want to do.
Thanks.
Thank you, Donna. And Donna was here when I started 6 years ago. And you might have chaired that year, if I recall. I think that was the year, that was your last chairing year.
Well, just think, I've been doing this since before probably Lena was born.
There you go. I'm not sure what that says about either of you.
No, it says a lot about over here. It's time to go.
Okay. Well, change your mind. Well, thank you very much for your service, Donna. We appreciate the time that you had. I wish our other members were here and we had a fuller house. Alas, we don't. But it's summer and, a little more casual. That's the nature of our meetings. But Donna, you will be missed, and we appreciate the time that you've had. And it's nice to have you back, to have a little reprise, let's say. Anything else in other business? Anything else anybody wants to cover? We did get a correspondence, a letter that was either a junk mail or just misdirected to me. It was misdirected. Yeah. So anyone out there in the ether who wants to send letters to the Director of Finance, please don't send them to me, because then I have to read them on the list of things that are here, because they are not for me to handle. So, but I do appreciate being called Mr. Adler in generic correspondence. That's nice. All right, seeing no other business, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move we adjourn.
Second.
Any further discussion on that? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. Motion carries. Meeting's adjourned. Thank you very much. Good night, everyone.